Welcome to Coffee Talk with Linda Davis. I'm Linda Davis. Before we dive into God's Word today, just a little about myself. I love Jesus. I love coffee. And I love sharing keys to abundant living. So if you haven't already, go grab a cup of coffee and join me today as we talk about just scales. The Lord has really been laying this phrase on my heart since the beginning of December. There's going to be just scales. I believe 2023 will be a year of just scales. So what does that mean? I believe God was stirring in me. I would even go so far as to say the end of November, beginning of December, that He's going to equal out, balance out the scales of justice. This is Him doing it. So, of course, with that in mind, it brought me to Proverbs 16:11. That verse talks about honest weights and honest scales, and that they are the Lord's, and that all the weights in the bag are His work. You can just Google scriptures for just scales. There's so many of them. Obviously, this is something God finds important. God really actually requires it of His people to function in a way with others that is equal in fairness, in justice, in perspective, even in the whole business realm. As a matter of fact, Proverbs 11:11 actually says a false balance. In other words, when the scales are off balanced, right? If they're not in line, something's not right. There's so many things that could fall under that. But a false balance is an abomination to the Lord. And when you look up the word abomination, it is a thing that causes disgust or hatred. God hates a false balance. What can fall underneath a false balance? Anything that's not upright, anything that's not in righteousness. If it's not clean hands, if it's not a pure heart, if it's about your agenda, if it's bringing somebody else down, making somebody else look bad to make yourself look better, you've altered the scales. That is a false balance. And actually, you have to continue on in that verse because it goes on to say in Proverbs 11:1, that accurate weights find favor with Him. So how do we apply this to our life? Just be honest, just be truthful, be real, basically, right? What you see is what you get. This is how, you don't have to skew things. You don't have to alter things. That's about pride. That's about arrogance. That's about selfish ambition. None of that comes underneath just scales. Just put it on the scale and see what it is. Just to give you a visual, of course, you look at most law, courts, anything with law, right? It's the laws of justice, the lady of justice. She's, a lot of times she has a sword in one hand and she's holding up scales in the other hand. And that's what law is supposed to. I'm not saying it does. It's supposed to bring justice. It's supposed to weigh everything that's presented to it and make a decision based off of the weights of the facts presented and make a just and fair decision based on that. Unfortunately, the whole system, it's just all skewed because not everything's getting presented in a balanced manner. Not everything is it's a false balance, basically. They're just trying to get the win. They're just trying to get away with it, whatever that might be. But when you really look at it, like going back to the olden days, even kind of we have it now somewhat in grocery stores. You might grab some produce, you might grab some fruit, some mixed nuts, whatever, meat at the deli, and it's put on a weight and your charge is based off of the weight. But so for them to be just, like you've heard the phrase, there's two sides to every story. You have to hear both sides. If you're only considering your own side, your scales are off balance. You have to consider the other person's perspective, right? List down all the things and okay, what's really the just decision here, We're not doing that. Other people are not doing that. People aren't doing that about us, and we're not doing that about others. So going back to the biblical time, I guess, and when this was written, what did a scale look like? What did people used to do that wouldn't have just scales? It would be a false balance. They'd hide something underneath the scale to make one side heavier than the other so they could make more of a profit off of whatever it was they were weighing and then selling, right? So if you have a scale and you place some gold on a scale and it's not balanced with the other side, it shows that you need to add a little more gold to equal the weight and know the exact pricing. Well, people would put a false weight underneath that to cheat people. And this is the issue. And this is really the big point. The owner of the scale, the one that has put the weight underneath, is fully aware of what they have done. So when you know that you're speaking falsely against others, you're condemning others in a public realm, and you know what you are saying doesn't even have to be a straight lie. I won't say it's a straight lie, right? Because that's kind of obvious. But you've just adjusted the scales a little bit to make yourself look better, to make your version of the story the honest and right and just one. And that's wrong. That's an abomination to God. And that's been done to a lot of people. And sometimes it has destroyed reputations. People have spoken out of line and done it quickly just because they were taking care of self, actually. They were concerned with self. And so if you're completely unaware, then that's a different perspective. That's a whole different thing. God's not going to be like, oh, you didn't know. You didn't know you were not speaking truth. That's different. But when you know what you're doing and you adjust the truth to your advantage, to your benefit, to be a better reflection of you, to spare your reputation, you are working in a false balance, and that is abomination to God. So that's just a warning. That's not really the point of what I'm trying to make today. On the other hand of that, for those that have had that done to them, and even I would say, had that done to them time and time again, God is saying in this season, He is going to balance out the scales. In 2023, that's what God is going to do. Hang in there. If you follow me on Facebook or Instagram at all, I made a post the other day, I guess it was last week probably, and it really kind of lined up with what I'm talking about today, is that, what seems to have gone unnoticed, what seems like has been unfair and unjust in your walk with the Lord, others' treatment of you, relationships that have been severed because of it, outside third-party relationships that have been severed because of false balances, false truths being spoken about you, that all of that seemingly has gone, and I say seemingly because it's never gone, nothing has ever gone unnoticed by God. It's about to be balanced out. I believe the Lord is saying this. What seems to have gone unnoticed is about to be balanced out. God has seen in you the hurt, but yet contending. The hurt, yet the pushing and the praying to keep your heart pure, your hands clean. If you know anything about me, you know that's my heart. Clean hands and a pure heart. That's how I want to function. That's who I want to be connected with. Those that have clean hands and a pure heart. Relationships where you can humbly admit to each other that you're wrong. People are wrong at times. We had a discussion last night around our table. No one's perfect. When you're saying that you're functioning in a biblical standard that meets the Lord's standard, and you're not saying in arrogance and haughtiness, right? But you're just saying that this is how I'm functioning, and I'm keeping my hands clean. I'm keeping my heart pure to the best of my ability. And when I can't do it, I posture myself before the Lord and I beg for His help for me to have clean hands and a pure heart. Because honestly, those are the ones that get through to the Lord. Those are the ones that's prayers are heard. Those are the ones that can ascend the throne of God. Psalm 24 tells us, who can ascend unto the hill of the Lord? Who shall stand in the holy place? Verses 3 and 4. And I'm kind of paraphrasing it here, but him that has clean hands, him is generalized. It just means us, people, humans, and him that has a pure heart. Those basically that have not lifted their soul up to vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. You can't be over here playing in the mud and then putting a petition before the Lord, trying to ascend the throne and thinking you're at the feet of the Lord. I'm here to tell you, you are not. You're not there. You have to have clean hands and a pure heart. And if you don't, and you know you don't, you have to simply, this is the awesome thing about it. This is all it takes. We repent before the Lord. And if we can, we go and make it right with a brother or a sister. And then we are at a place where we are lifted up to the very hill of the Lord and standing in his holy place, because the blood of Jesus gave us that right. But when we play in the mud, we take that right away from ourselves. But back to those that are in waiting, back to those that have had clean hands and a pure heart, have repented over and over again. Lord, create in me a steadfast heart, Lord, right? David cried out. We know, and that was my whole point. We know David wasn't perfect. We know we're not perfect. But it's all the posture of the heart. If you want just scales in 2023, make sure you have postured your heart before the Lord with a simple cry to have clean hands and a pure heart before him. And then it doesn't matter what anybody else has to say about you. Let them talk. And that's what I was getting to with my point of my post that I made last week, was that we can never go wrong. We are never in the wrong when we will simply step back and wait on God to move on our behalf. And he usually, I would say he may, but instead I'll put usually, he usually takes longer than we want him to take to move on our behalf, to be our defender, to be our vindicator. Why? I don't know, honestly, other than he's probably working on our hearts. But, and this is the thing, doing that goes against everything inside of us, especially if you have what I would call a fighter spirit, especially if you can be one to quick to raise up, quick to mouth back, quick to have a response, and with wanting a heart of fairness and justice. But sometimes you just have to step back, close your mouth, and let the Lord move on your behalf. It's hard. We want to set the record straight, right? Because we know we've done the right thing. We know we've walked in the right path. But yet there are murmurings over here on the right. And that's a distraction. That's all that is. Don't let those things distract you while you are waiting on the just scales from the Lord. No, you focus on having clean hands. You focus on having a pure heart. Because I've found over the years, it is much better to step back and let God stand up on your behalf, because I promise you he will. He will. He knows. He's watching. He's not missing a thing. What he's actually doing when you're wanting the other person to get their just due, he's not actually concerned about them in the moment as far as it relates to you. He's concerned with you, and he's concerned with your response in the situation. Don't pass judgment. Don't speak trifle words yourself. Guard your heart. Guard your hands, guard your mouth, and you will ascend the hill, and you will have intimacy and fellowship with the Lord, and he will respond to that. I promise you he will. He will respond to his bride. Let the work God has done in your life in those moments, because when we just simply lay prostrate before the Lord and we simply just say, Lord, this is my situation, and this is hurtful to me, or I'm embarrassed, or, I'm concerned about my reputation. I'm concerned about how other people see me, right? All that focus is on self. But if we put it to the Lord, like, I don't want this concerned. I want to be about kingdom purposes, and I'm getting distracted. Just doing that, just being prostrate before that and the Lord, That's going to cause the Lord to do work in your life that will bring forth a fruit that cannot be cannot be spoken against, cannot be denied, right? You can't deny that an apple tree produces apples. You can't deny that. You can't deny that someone's been from the Lord and the fruit of that is the things of the Lord in their life. Healthy fruit from that. Healthy fruit comes from a healthy tree. That will speak for you. And God will expose others when he's done dealing with their heart and it's time for them to be exposed because they wouldn't respond to him dealing with their heart. He's not exposing anybody to make them look bad and you look good. That's not the heart of God. He will only expose somebody for their heart situation, for their soul, their salvation. He will contend with them in privacy for your situation. He will contend with the root of what their heart issue is that caused them to have a false balance with you. And then when they do not respond to that, then he will expose them because he's concerned about their soul. But back to us again, keep getting on to the other person there, but really it's about us. And I will say this, if God requires, like we see in a lot of scriptures in the Bible, us to have just scales, us to have a fair balance, if he requires that of us, then I promise you, he puts the same demand on himself. And what seems to go unnoticed in regards to the balances of justice, the balances of opportunity, the balances of something stolen from us, whether it is opportunity, whether it is finances, whether it is relationships, whether it is reputation, whatever it might be, in overlooking, selfish ambition, whatever the reason that there were false balances, those scales in your life are about to be balanced. In other words, where opportunity was stolen, different, maybe better, opportunity will be provided. Where you've been overlooked out of jealousy, out of competition, God will open a different opportunity. He will shine the light on you in this season because he's balancing out the scales. There will be just scales. They're about to be balanced. If you have been diligent and continue to be diligent, and even as you go throughout this year, you may have to prostrate yourself 5 times over and say, Lord, I just want to have a heart that's pure. I want to have a heart that is free from offense. I want my hands to be clean. If you have to get up every day saying that, get up every day saying that. There's been already many years of pushing and praying and contending to do just that, to keep a pure heart, to keep hands that are clean. And God has noticed, this is key, God has noticed what others have not, for the good and for the bad. God has noticed, don't miss this, God has noticed what others have not. And in light of that, he is here with the weights for your scale. He is about to balance out. He is here to bring favor of open doors, of opportunity to put on your side of the scale. Restoration of relationships to put on your side of the scale. That's what he's showing up with. Opportunity to put on your side of the scale. Those finances that were stolen, to put on your side of the scale. He's balancing out the scales. He's the one that carries the weights in his hand. And he's balancing them out to be what he originally intended them to be. Now, they may be through a different avenue. They may be through a different source, but they will get you to the place he always intended you to be because his word cannot return to him void. So as long as you've kept your hands clean and your heart's pure, you will be standing in the very place you should have been standing in. I actually spoke last year, in the beginning of the year, last January, I believe, about the fact that the Lord was opening doors for effectual service and that the enemy was going to come against us because of that. And that it would be a battle. And it has been a battle. I'm sure some of you are shaking your head in agreement, like you don't even know the battle it's been. But God's here to produce just scales in your life because you kept contending with the heart before the Lord. That's the key. That's the key that we can't miss. These were doors that were intended to be open that the enemy thought that he could shut. But God is showing up to balance out the scales. God is here this year to open to you that particular door that maybe you stepped back from. Maybe the battle was a little too heavy, a little too intense, a little too much contending, and you just needed to sit and rest. You just needed to sit and catch your breath. And God's before you again saying, here I am. Rise up. Let's go. Because I'm the one that holds the weights. I'm the one that establishes the scales of justice. Remember, Proverbs 16:11 tells us that all the weights in the bag are his work. They're his work. So if you had false balances in your life in this past year, this is the truth of it that sometimes we don't like to hear. It's really because God wanted to show you something in you. Maybe it was just a little thing there that he wanted to show you in you that was still in you that you thought you had dealt with and you had not. So now you've spent this time contending and pressing and praying and being before the Lord and re-dealing with that issue that you thought was all taken care of, but there were just some dust particles left, I believe. And now it's been redusted, if that makes sense, if you can kind of picture that mental picture. But I just see God's hand with weights in them. And he's putting them on the scale, and he's balancing out what should have been against the attack that was. And what do these just scales look, and I'm wrapping it up here, what do these just scales look like to God? Because this is the truth. What God considers just may be just a little different than your expectation, than my expectation. But for us, we simply have to do what it takes. No matter how long we have to prostrate ourselves before the Lord, begging for clean hands and a pure heart, begging to be able to forgive and release. Do it as long as it takes. He's balancing out these scales. The false balance is being removed. And God is going to have just scales in this season for those that have continued to remain bowed in the posture of their heart before him. He's been waiting to do in your life and through your life many things that have been held back because of the position of our heart when we have had false balances. And we've allowed our heart to rear up its ugly feelings of offense and anger and frustration and unforgiveness, and momentarily all those emotions momentarily are fine, but we have stayed there. So that's why the Lord has had to contend with us to keep contending. But he is saying for this season, for those that have pushed through, maybe you sat down for a moment, but you're standing back up now and you're having revelation before the Lord that what I made about somebody else's heart, the Lord's been trying to show me about my own heart. So I once again rend open my heart before your eyes, Lord, for your inspection, Lord, and show me the dust particles that need to be removed so I can have clean hands and a pure heart, and you can do what you want to do in me in 2023 by balancing out the scales of justice. And what is it? That his word tells us what he wants to do. He wants to restore to you the years that the swarming locust have eaten. The consuming locust, the crawling locust, the chewing locust. He wants us to eat in plenty and be satisfied, praising continually his name, praising his name because he has balanced out the scales of justice for us. And he has dealt wondrously with us. And he will not allow us to be put to shame.